Welcome back to another Women Beyond Borders podcast episode. Podcast where we spotlight female leaders who lead and inspire across borders. Today, I'm deeply honored to be joined by Carlien Scheele, the director of European Institute for Gender Equality. Carlien has dedicated her career to advancing gender equality across Europe, ensuring that evidence, policy, and everyday realities come together to drive progress. In this conversation, we'll explore Carlien's personal leadership journey, EIGE's key priorities for 2025, and what it truly means to lead with purpose. We'll also discuss how communities like Women Beyond Borders can connect local action with European-level change, and how each of us can play a role in building a more equal future. Carlien, welcome to Women Beyond Borders. I would love to start with you personally because our listeners always want to know the leader behind the role.
Well, thank you, Margaret. Many thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to speak with you. And also the topic of this podcast inspires me a lot. So I'm happy to speak about, of course, my agency, but also how I got to this position. And I hope that I can inspire others.
So to start with you personally, what first drew you into the field of gender equality? Was there a moment or experience that shaped your decision to dedicate your career to this cause?
Well, to be completely honest, let's say my start in the gender equality portfolio, which took place in 2001, it was a bit of a coincidence because I worked in Dutch government in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and I had a feeling that I wanted to dedicate my career to international work. And then I happened to see a vacancy in a newspaper from the Gender Equality Department, advertising a senior policy advisor job. Of course, working in the gender equality area, but with a huge focus on international work. And so, to be completely honest, it was not so much the content of the portfolio as such, in first instance, I must say, that drew my attention. I also grew up in a quite traditional family, with my father being the breadwinner. I was raised in 70s and 80s, so it was not a topic that was known to me and that I was eager for to work. But once I had joined the department, my first project was improving the role of women and the influence of women in conflict and post-conflict situations. And once I started to work on this, mapping, for example, the amount of women in Dutch civil service, but also in defense and all the relevant areas in that portfolio that closely links to Resolution 1325, and seeing the very, let's say, minimal data. I mean, there were hardly any women in that area visible. That's when the fire started in me, and I thought, but this is unacceptable. And then, of course, when I continued to work in that department and also touched upon other portfolios like domestic violence, participation of women in the labor market, and seeing the staggering negative, I must say, data, that's when I decided, yes, I'm going to dedicate an important part of my career to this important portfolio.
And since taking up the role of director in February 2020, how has your leadership vision evolved in the light of emerging challenges from COVID, recovery to digitalization, and political pressures?
Well, I joined EIGE. I applied for the job because I was so taken by the whole portfolio that when I saw the vacancy, I decided to apply. And indeed, soon after I had joined, a COVID pandemic burst out. And what we noticed through reaching out to member states, but also, of course, through reading articles in the media, there was the sudden, let's say, rise of domestic violence in families, because women were locked up. We were all locked up, but women were locked up with their perpetrators who committed domestic violence. And so that was basically the first crisis. Then, of course, another crisis I could mention here is, of course, the invasion of Russia. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, we saw women and children fleeing the war. And what we noticed is that in times of crisis, and I'm sure you are aware of this as well, but we could also substantiate this with data, that the attention for gender equality is pushed aside, because now we have more important issues to solve. We have a crisis to solve, but it's done in a completely gender-blind way. So what we keep emphasizing, and we even have a dedicated page on our website that we have called Gender Equality and Crisis, that in times of crisis, it's even more important than ever to take the gender equality dimension into account. So that's basically what we keep emphasizing. For those who do not know my agency, so the European Institute for Gender Equality collects data and evidence on the state of play of gender equality in the European Union and the individual 27 member states on different in different areas. And we make that information, and we make those data, scientific data, high quality data, available for policymakers. And wherever we feel the need to speak, we speak. Although we have a few portfolios, of course, that are the priority topics for the agency. We can speak about it if you like. But so in times of crisis, let's say attention shifts completely to the other side. We have to solve a crisis, but usually this is done in a completely gender-blind way. And we keep providing the evidence that gender equality is at the heart of the solution.
And how do you ensure evidence remains central in policymaking while also engaging the public, civil society, and women on the ground?
Well, I mean, it's not a secret, and you know this as well because you're working on the same portfolio, that it becomes more and more difficult, and for me also more and more relevant, to stress that the data that we provide and the information we provide, it's scientific data. So everything we collect and everything we provide and everything we analyze and we base our recommendations on is based on data that are officially collected at national level. So statistical offices of the European Union, Eurostat, there's a few other data sources. So it's scientifically proof, it's high quality, it's sound evidence. And of course, there's the non-believers who will always, let's say, always maybe doubt the relevance of these data or the quality of these data. But this is what we are collecting. And another important source is, of course, our surveys. To mention one important survey is our survey on care, because there were no data available on informal care, childcare, and care for other dependents. So we started undertaking our own surveys. So we interview citizens throughout the European Union. So it's their voice. And if, let's say, criticasters say, EIGE's data are not relevant, we don't believe them, it's the same people who tend to use people's voice as their arguments why their political parties are relevant or why they are relevant. So, but you can't do cherry picking. So if we collect data and evidence through surveys, through official statistical sources, it's sound and it's solid evidence. And I keep stressing that. And another thing that we started to do, and maybe this is something that's in the beginning was a bit difficult also for the non-governmental world, was that with our data and evidence, we also calculated the economic benefits, or one could say the economic costs, or the economic benefits of gender equality and the economic costs of gender inequality. We will never lose out of sight women's rights and the importance of women's rights. It's also important to not only put women's rights in the center of our discussions, but also show the actual costs. And that, by the way, is also true in the times of crisis, the actual costs of gender inequality. A good example here is violence against women, where we calculated that on a yearly basis, the economic costs are 366 billion euros for the European Union. So we are talking about huge costs for society, not only women in the area of women's rights, but also the economy.
And as you mentioned, NGOs and different communities at Women Beyond Borders, we connect women who are navigating life across countries, identities, and sectors. And many of them are looking for ways to link local work with bigger systems like the EU. What role do you see for communities, like, for example, Women Beyond Borders, in amplifying EIGE's findings and bringing them into people's everyday lives?
Well, for civil society organizations, it's true that, I mean, they're the first ones to respond mostly to crisis. They're very close to the people that we are talking about. No, so it's difficult for me to see, and it's also revealed through our monitoring of, as we call it, institutional mechanisms. No, in the member states. So the institutional mechanisms working on gender equality. You may know that this is Area H of the Beijing Platform for Action. So we have been tasked by the Commission to monitor on a regular basis how these mechanisms, what they look like, how much money, how are they created, how many staff, etc., etc. And civil society is part of this mechanism, and it's really sad to see that civil society is suffering more and more, from financial cuts. Even if they have an official role, I mean, it seems sometimes like a ticking the book exercise for governments so that they speak with you. But speaking with someone doesn't mean that you listen to a person. So it's sad to see that civil society is, I mean, yeah, it's less and less consulted, and many organizations are suffering from financial problems, and basically, it's difficult to do your job. So what we find important when working on our research reports or any other activities we undertake, we always consult civil society. We speak with you, we speak with relevant organizations, often I must say in Brussels, EU level, but we also try to reach out at national level. I do quite many country visits, for example, three per year. I go with a full delegation to countries to speak with the governments, very often linked to their upcoming EU presidencies. But we always speak with civil society because we want to hear your voice. We want to hear what is the situation in the member states. Of course, we hear one side from the government, but we also need to speak with civil society and with media. And for us, you are a very important source of information and also a very important interlocutor. So, yeah, civil society, I keep stressing this everywhere where I speak, that you are under threat, and it is extremely relevant to have a solid civil society in place, NGOs in place who represent several groups, because you're close to the people and you know what is going on and what the problems are and what the challenges are.
Move into EIG's current work because it really shapes women's daily realities across Europe. So, among ongoing projects, from supporting the implementation of new EU directive on combating violence against women and against domestic violence, to the care survey, to the gender equality index, which do you consider most critical in 2025 and why?
Well, to be honest, everything we do is critical and important, but maybe I can mention a few projects that play an important role in 2025. So first of all, I would like to mention here the upcoming launch of the Gender Equality Index 2025, that we will release on the 2nd of December in Brussels. I hope you know the index, but it's basically the thermometer where we show the state of play of gender equality in the EU, but also the individual member states. We benchmark, we rank, I should say, the member states, and we look at different areas like money, work, health, power, knowledge. So it's an important instrument. We slightly revised the methodology in 2025, so it will be a new approach, but nevertheless very interesting. Another let's say, project that is very relevant, I have already mentioned it, and we will soon have the outcomes of the second wave, is our survey on care. So we are interviewing, this is a second wave, citizens throughout the European Union to understand how they divide, let's say, informal care and work and other issues in private life. To also see if there's changes compared to the past. Unfortunately, we don't see much change because still the burden of work of informal care is taken up by women. But it's an important survey because it's the only source of information in the European Union on how informal care is being, let's say, distributed between women and men, between partners. Then I would also like to mention here, although I must say that most probably the launch will be at the beginning of 2026, but we are working on a further refining of the outcomes of the EU-wide survey on gender-based violence and violence against women. We do this together with Eurostat and the Fundamental Rights Agency. I mean, we published that survey last year. Staggering outcomes, very depressing, I must say, when I saw the results and saw how they haven't improved compared to the first survey 10 years ago. I mean, I was really shocked. There's so much suffering amongst women in the European Union because of domestic violence and other forms of violence. But anyway, we are further looking into the data. Because we want to understand even better what are the causes of this phenomenon, which is, for me, a hidden pandemic, violence against women. And that report will certainly give new insights. We are working on it currently, but as I said, most probably it will be launched and published, I mean, in first quarter of 2026. Well, this is to name a few, but of course, everything we do is relevant. Everything we do is, well, if I may use that word, exciting, but I mean it in the good sense because it's important that we keep bringing relevant evidence to the table for policymakers and anyone else who is who can use our data. Also for civil society, I hope and I'm convinced that you use our data and evidence for your advocacy to raise awareness about the need to work on gender equality and to mainstream it in relevant portfolios.
The Gender Equality Index in 2024 gives us a clear snapshot of progress, but at the same time, you're saying that domestic violence and the violence against women has worsened recently. So, behind this, I know gender equality, there are different things included, but when it comes to this violence against women and domestic violence in the European Union, how do you see this?
That's a very good question. And to be honest, I mean, if you look at the different gender indices that we published over the past 10 years, of course, the conclusion is that the growth is very minor. There's slow progress, so to say. We calculated a few years ago, based on the index, it will take another 60 years to achieve full gender equality. And that was under the assumption that nothing would change. And we know that gender narratives and strategies become more and more important. So it's not an easy topic to work on, but it's relevant that we keep stressing by using information and data what is progress needs to be made and what improvement needs to be achieved. But let me focus a bit on the index because that's what you asked me. So what we see is quite a rapid change in the area of power. So partly due to legislation that member states had already adopted about women in decision making, but also due to the directive on gender balance in company boards. I'm sure that this has had a positive impact. At the same time, it's still the domain that has the lowest score. So although change is quite rapid, the score is still the lowest of the 6 domains. When you look at women's employment, it has increased, but it also has a little bit of a downside because a significant gender gap remains because many women work in lower paying jobs. And as I already said, they face barriers due to caregiving responsibilities. So when we see progress, it's nice. It's not a huge, let's say, step forward. It always comes, of course, with things to further be improved. But as long as there's progress, I would say let's count our blessings. But it's not an easy, but I don't need to tell you, it's not an easy process. It's not an easy process. We should stick to our narratives. We should stick using our data and information and bring our own narrative to the table. I think that's also very relevant to stress. If we believe in what we find, what we have found, and what we say, we should continue bringing that message to the table.
Thank you. EIGE is also working on gender mainstreaming in the European Green Deal. Could you share concrete practices you've seen that show how climate and gender equality intersect?
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic as well as many others, because when the European Green Deal was designed, we also alerted the Commission that it's important to focus on gender equality in the Green Deal. Well, this is typically, for me, this is typically an area where people wouldn't necessarily think that there's an important gender equality dimension. I can maybe mention you one area where there was a huge focus on in the past years due to the war that broke out in Ukraine, and this was the energy crisis. The energy crisis is a topic that many member states focused on. So they, for example, provided their citizens with extra budgets to be able to pay the higher bills. And in many cases, they didn't make any distinction between the citizens. So everyone got a certain amount. This happened, for example, in my home country, Netherlands, where we all got a bit of support from the government. But if you look into the situation of citizens and if you look at poverty rates, then our research shows that it's mostly women who live in poverty in the European Union. And those are by default the ones who cannot pay their energy bills anyway, most probably. They live in less insulated houses and they simply don't have the budget to improve, let's say, the state of their homes. So what we kept stressing to governments is when you want to support citizens, please look into the real needs of women and men in all their diversity. So this is just a small example of how gender blindness may lead to measures that do not accommodate the real needs in the countries. If you look at our website under the Green Deal topic, you will find a collection of 12 good practices that we collected for mainstreaming gender in the European Green Deal. They are collected amongst the member states. And I can give you a few concrete examples. I won't mention names, but I will focus on the topics. So there are good practices focusing on ensuring fair job opportunities so that both women and men benefit from new green jobs. There were good practices focusing on supporting women in green careers through targeted campaigns and training. There were practices focusing on including gender equality goals in environmental policies. And also there were projects focusing on using gender responsive public procurement when awarding contracts under the Green Deal. So I invite you to look at our website, to read the good practices and also to feel inspired because they're very interesting. And they were also set up in very short time, so to say. So really good initiatives, I should say.
Was EIG embedding intersectionality, gender combined with race, disability, migration status into its data and recommendations?
Yes, well, we have an intersectional approach in our data collection. When you look at the Gender Equality Index, you will see that there is a separate section on intersectionality, where, for example, we focus on disability, we focus on family composition, countries of origin, age. So whenever data are available, we try to collect them. But of course, and for some time we have been saying, listen, if data are not available, we cannot collect them. It's different in our surveys. In our surveys, we were able to include specific questions that touched upon intersectionality. But there, unfortunately, we saw in the responses that the samples were too small to draw any solid conclusions. So what we did last year, we developed an internal strategy on intersectionality. And we're now basically including intersectionality in everything we do, not only in research, but also in the way we communicate, in the way we engage with our stakeholders. We try to engage with a broad variety of stakeholders so that we also listen to different voices, even better than we have done in the past, because we have always been doing this. And also internally, our internal, let's say, cuisine, for example, our human resources policies. We scrutinized everything, and we made the approach do it more from an intersectional perspective. It's also very important for EIGE, and this is not something we start doing now from scratch. We have done for quite some time, but also to better look than we have done before what are relevant partners to work with. Of course, we work closely together with the Fundamental Rights Agency that touches anyway upon a broader group of, let's say, broader characteristics of groups of people in society. So this is basically how we try to take this on board, and it's very interesting, and it gives a clear and more solid picture of the situation of women and men in all their diversity, but also their needs. And the better we bring this to the surface, the better policymakers can base their policies on those data.
Looking ahead 3 or 5 years from now, what is your vision for the institute? Are there new frontiers such as artificial intelligence, digitalization, migration, or health, where you see gender equality work becoming especially urgent?
Well, looking into the future, I think one important goal is to keep the agency relevant, reliable. I mean, we are the only agency in the European Union working on gender equality. And my big wish is that everyone who thinks about gender equality or wants to have information on gender equality automatically reaches out to EIGE. We provided input to the Commission, to the European Commission, for the new gender equality strategy, because it's important that of course it contains the relevant topics for the future. EIGE has taken an approach of strategic foresight a few years ago. So we were looking at the main developments that the Commission defined for the future. And amongst that whole list of, let's say, main developments that they saw for the future, we defined a few. We defined several. And we consulted our stakeholders, our management board, our experts forum, but also we did a public consultation to try and find those themes that they find relevant for the future, also in light of gender equality. So we have highlighted, and we communicate this to everyone who matters, but also to the Commission for the new strategy. So we found, let's say, the following 5 key themes that are relevant for the future: digitalization, the green transition, the future of work, diversifying inequalities, and shifting values. They are extremely relevant, but you also mentioned the topic of health, which is personally very dear to my heart, because the healthcare is still quite gender neutral, or one might say gender blind. So this is a topic that I would like to add to that list, and let's see what the Commission comes up with. In 2 days, no, actually tomorrow in Brussels, there will be a conference to endorse the new roadmap for women's rights, which is an extremely important document. And this is the guideline for the new gender equality strategy. And I see it as an important role for EIGE to help the Commission and the member states to implement that strategy. And this we will do by keeping to provide extremely relevant and high quality data and information, and to communicate about it with the relevant stakeholders. And we do this in partnership with others.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us the European Institute of Gender Equality work. And now a little bit on a personal note again. What have you learned about resilience and influence as a woman in leadership that younger women could take with them?
Well, what I have learned about resilience, or maybe it's also a bit my character, but my personal motto is that it's important to stay authentic. Of course, you have to follow your mind, but also the heart, I would say. And if you truly believe in something, and if you truly think that you have the relevant evidence and the relevant narrative to speak with others and to try and convince them, I would say do it. Never give up. Listen. Active listening is also very important, because of course sending messages doesn't do the trick. But also try to find out why the other side of the table says what they say, and then try to find, let's say, a common ground to work on. Being authentic, I think it's very important. If you truly believe in something, bring it to the table in the best possible way that fits you. And so don't try to play a role or to imitate others, but do it the way that feels good for you, you feel happy about. And I think that's the best possible approach. And well, to my luck, I have never been a victim of, let's say, cyber violence, or all these attacks on women who are leaders. I haven't experienced, well, of course, now and then, but I haven't endured heavy attacks, because that, of course, is a completely different situation. But still, my motto would be, try to see how far you can get and bring the right messages to the table, and be yourself.
Okay. Um, I would like to give you space to share directly with our listeners, many of whom are young women stepping into leadership or advocacy or just starting out. What would you like to say to them about building careers in gender equality or creating change, even if they feel small or in between countries or minds about their next steps?
Yeah. Well, one piece of advice that I can give you, because I made this mistake in the past, is don't wait until someone asks you to apply for something, or to take an important step. If you think that people see what you do and should come and reach out to you, they won't. Most often they won't do this. So if you really feel that you see an interesting opportunity, go for it. Don't wait, go for it. Prepare really, really well. Stay authentic, stay close to yourself. And if you don't get it, if you don't get a job, of course it's frustrating, but maybe it's meant to be. That's what I have thought several times when I applied for a job and I didn't get it. But yeah, my most important advice is, don't wait until someone asks you to apply. If you see an interesting opportunity, go for it.
Thank you. And finally, if you could highlight one project, one insight, or one hope from the European Institute of Gender Equality's work in 2025, you would want everyone to carry forward, what would it be?
Well, I think one hope from EIGE's work is that what I see, that there are so many partners in the field and so many citizens who are receptive to our messages. So I genuinely believe that there's room for progress. And the most important thing is that we do not work in silos, but that we work together. Governments, civil society, agencies that collect data and information. If we join forces, there's so much we can achieve. And don't let us get depressed because we see every day we see the news. Of course, there's a lot of depressing news and it's horrible. But I still think that progress can be made in the area of gender equality and that we can really improve the lives of women and also men in the European Union. If only we don't work in silos, but we reach out to each other and we work together. And we are also proud to work in the area of gender equality. It's really relevant and we should really enjoy doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlien. Thank you for this thoughtful and inspiring conversation. For our listeners, I hope today's episode reminds you that change begins wherever you are, whether that's within your community, your organization, or simply in how you use your voice. To learn more about EIGE's work, please visit their website. And to connect with our growing community of purpose-driven women across borders, follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and join us on WhatsApp. Until next time, keep crossing borders, building bridges, and leading with heart. Thank you, Carlien.
Thank you, Margaret, and good luck with your important work.
Thank you.